Hi sablechicken. This is a short reply to your video. Scientists have studied the generality of developmental mechanisms by comparing Drosophila with Nasonia, a distant species that diverged over 250 million years ago. The research team's results showed that flies and wasps employ most of the same genes and similar interactions among these genes, but some events are changed to adjust to the developmental constraints. Flies rely on a gene called becoid to pattern their early embryo. However, becoid is unique to flies and does not exist in wasps or other species. The becoid gene is a maternal effect gene, a gene that is produced by the mother and packaged into her eggs to establish polarity, or which end of the egg is anterior. Becoid specifies which end of the egg will form the fly's head. Becoid is also a transcription factor, or gene that regulates the activity of other genes. It is also a relatively new gene, one that is taking over a morphogenetic function that has been carried out by several other more primitive genes in the ancestral insect. If non-cyclohafan flies lack becoid, where did it come from? We don't expect that it magically appeared out of nowhere. All of these flies have a closely related gene called HARX3. In the stem cyclohafans, HARX3 was duplicated and gave rise to two new genes, becoid and a closely related sister gene, ZRCNALT. These two genes specialized, and becoid's expression was confined to just the maternal subset of HARX3's job. Evolution and simple genetics made the process more complicated, using two genes to do a task formerly handled by one.
So what do we learn by looking at 600 million years of animal history? Evolution's tinkering with mammalness to make whales. In the same way, it's tinkering with fishiness to make tetrapods. And it's tinkering with animalness to make all the different body plans that we see. All these different creatures are variations of the same theme, restated over and over again. The question was, what was evolution tinkering with? One of the remarkable discoveries of the last 20 years is that evolution's not tinkering with the bodies. It's tinkering with the recipe, the machinery that builds bodies. What is that recipe? What is that machinery? It's the genes.
Scientists had long suspected that embryos held clues to how animals evolve. All embryos start out as clusters of nearly identical cells. But soon, an embryo partitions itself into specialized segments, which develop into the final form of the animal. What controlled this process? How did the embryos know what shape to take? One researcher, Dr. Ed Lewis of Caltech, studied this question for 30 years by crossbreeding thousands of flies. Lewis's work led him to a controversial idea. He proposed that a surprisingly simple mechanism was shaping embryos. He wrote that each segment of the fly was being directed to grow by a single gene. A small set of genes, a kind of genetic toolkit, appeared to be laying out the entire body. In 1994, Walter Gehring of the University of Basel isolated the gene that triggered the growth of eyes in fruit flies. The gene was called eyeless, because flies without it developed with no eyes. Gehring knew of a gene in mice that worked in the same way. He wondered, were the two genes the same?
And this question we tested by taking the mouse gene and putting it into fruit flies to see whether flies can understand the message of the mouse.
Gehring replaced a fly's gene for eyes with the mouse gene.
And to everybody's surprise, the mouse gene works perfectly well and can induce a compound eye in the fruit fly.
The fruit fly grew normal fruit fly eyes using a gene from a mouse. Not only did the two creatures use the same mechanism, they used the same gene.
So what this means is in some ways, some sense, evolution is a simpler process than we first thought. When you think about all of the diversity of forms out there, we first believed that this would involve all sorts of novel creations, starting from scratch, again and again and again. We now understand that no, that evolution works with packets of information and uses them in new and different ways and new and different combinations without necessarily having to invent anything fundamentally new, but new combinations.
Suddenly, the commonality of form among animals was understood. Animals resembled each other because they all used the same set of genes to build their bodies. A set of genes inherited from a common ancestor that lived long ago.
And there's only one inescapable conclusion you can draw from that, which is if all of these branches have these genes, then you have to go to the base of that, which is the last common ancestor of all animals, and you deduce it must have had these genes. So the whole radiation of animals, the whole spring of animal diversity has been fed by essentially the same set of genes.